Hello, Landon Herbert again. Now it's the 21st of September 2018. I hope you brought along your Dramamine and some bicarb and a barf bag. This is going to be pretty sticky. This is part two of Horror Without Evidence. Don't expect any references or graphs. This is just what I've kind of put together from what might happen. I do not have any decent data. Okay, recently read that somebody did a study found that children born of ethnically different parents tend to be smarter and stronger than those born of parents in the same ethnic group. I think I saw something like that going on when I was a child, and I would have to say that my observation then was better complexions and more sociable, really. Um, uh, they lorded it over the rest of us. Um, the Those were different times. Of course, the rich have great opportunity to meet those from a different country. Uh, uh, but the study I read was supposed to have controlled for that sort of thing. I doubt it really did. I take a little comfort in the observation, even if it is true. Mules tend to be bigger and stronger than horses and donkeys that produce them. Swapping out fertility for muscle is a poor move from a standpoint of natural selection, unless the person is going to grow up to pull a plow or otherwise be a slave, as mules generally are. Sorry to have gotten into politics. I suppose it's unavoidable since we're talking about the elite and about status and violence anyway. What the study I just mentioned did not address is whether the children of those mixed marriages have increased incidence of mental problems, particularly autism, or as they now say, autism spectrum disorder, um, ASD, which isn't uh, to be confused with CCSD, which is common cold spectrum disorder. Yeah. Okay, reading about ASD prevalence is somewhat disorienting. Obviously, there are people who are passionate about the issue, and that makes a lot of people shake in their reasoning. As for me, I could hardly be more passionate about the general topics since we're talking about what is on the table is the extinction of the entire human species. But if my reasoning is dysfunctional, I truly beg anybody to give me a good steer. If I'm wrong, tell me. If you think I might be wrong, let me know. Don't have to have proof, evidence. Just tell me where you have a problem or where you think I may have a problem. Okay, somebody made a remark to the effect that some states have higher, we're still talking about autism incidents, some states have a higher incidence of autism than others, but it's because they have more affluence and urbanization in those states, and affluence and urbanization are known to correlate with um, higher incidence of autism. You know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Doesn't that tell you something? Um, they interpret that to mean that the diagnosis is more likely to be made because of the presence of experts. The mind reels from the rationalization. On the other hand, an expert in New Jersey said the politics and diagnostic criteria are unchanged over the past 20 years in New Jersey. Incidence has been going steadily upward, just like everywhere else. My impulse is to say that ASD is caused by the same outbreeding that causes infertility. But in the case of ASD, it's hard for me to fathom just where natural selection might come into play. ASD is more common among boys, where of course um, it's not very effective um, in terms of natural selection. Men are expendable with respect to tribal fertility. So if you make a bunch of the men autistic and that somehow reduces their fitness, I'm not going to change the tribe. As for women, well, they can be as sweet and as attractive as you please. I think I've mentioned that elsewhere and elsewhere, but there are probably always going to be men who care nothing for whether the woman is sweet or attractive or interested or autistic. So, hard to see how natural selection could induce um, could produce an increase in autism because basically it wouldn't affect fertility anyway, at least on that reasoning. On the subject of female attractiveness, which is so anomalous, the failure of people to remark on it is very odd. In other animals, the sex that is attractive is not the sex that does all the work. Now, it takes songbirds. The male struts and squawks and has the beautiful song. The female builds the nest, lays the eggs, raises the young. Yep, they can share the work sometimes, but if so, it's hard to tell at a glance whether it's a male or female. Um, I suspect that, like Lot's daughters, remember the story of Lot? If not, got some scripture to read. Women have, over the years, often sought the attention of older men if infertility was progressing such that the young men were becoming gay. Um, might be a bit harder to attract a bitter old man than an oversexed young one. So the young, fertile women look unbelievably attractive, particularly since they are offering not only their attractiveness, but doing all the work, taking all the risks. The young men, well, you take a healthy young man and follow him around for a while. I don't mean a man, a youth, teenager, whatever. Follow him around for a while, you teenager into early manhood. Um, Sooner or later, he's going to fall asleep. And when he does, he's going to be aroused sexually. And if it's been more than a very few days, he's going to have a wet dream. What in the world does that accomplish? Well, it's just a sign of the fact that the young men are sexed up to the max. Orgasm is the default setting for a healthy young man. All right, so it doesn't matter to selection how oversexed the young man is. You gotta oversex the young ones so you still got a chance of getting some performance out of the old ones. Yes, that performance likely is going to be elicited by very attractive young women. Work for Lot and his daughters. I mentioned earlier that the essential universal capacity to sense something divine in their experience has a selective advantage. On the other hand, people are capable of abstract reasoning, which by the rules of science is not actually possible. Got a reference for you there. And there is a perception of fair play. There is empathy even among animals. Animals can sense fair play. Animals have empathy. These personal observations and scientific experiments agree to that. Whether animals can engage in abstract reasoning, I have no idea, because I cannot think of an experiment or observation that would tell me. However, you got three things together: abstract reasoning, empathy, and fairness, and that means there is, based solely not on the human mind or some what do they call it, meta property of the human brain, but a core principle of the universe drives the community toward the principles of enlightenment. You know, freedom of speech, that sort of thing. Things fading now. But given sufficient stability for sufficiently long, that will be the direction. Now they call the Enlightenment ideas of dead white men. No, they are not ideas, they are discoveries. They are part of the universe. Um, and like genocide, which we don't like, these behaviors, these Enlightenment principles, are not principles so much as, what would you say, routines, reflexes. They're below our perceptual horizon. Uh, these the enlightened thing ideas, paradigms only cropped up in Europe after centuries of quasi stability and interchange of ideas. Yeah, I know Europe was not been stable and they keep fighting wars, but they survive. Nation after nation, regime after regime endures for centuries and centuries, long past the time when a centralized society would have collapsed, gone extinct. I think it may be because it rains in Europe, and so everybody can go his own way. Anyway, um, I suspect the Enlightenment pronouncements would have been ascendant, would have been dominant long before if we hadn't had that tragic cycle of development and then extinction, particularly in places where civilization seems to have flourished early on. Um, Knowing what you should have learned here and in the relevant links that I pointed out to you at the beginning. Cycle can be broke, but not it's you it's not generally known. In other words, if you took what I'm teaching you right now and it became widely known, then civilizations would not fail and good ideas would flourish and become more dominant. So, of my atheist brethren, I am tempted to ask exactly which of the universal constants of science has been tweaked or has been luckily placed to, not placed, has been luckily, coincidentally, the way it is, which one of those creates the Enlightenment? If you don't know which one, well, then you're actually an agnostic and your atheism is just some kind of social game you're playing. Starting from the existence of a tribal holy thing and given the human impulse to seek divine things, I propose that in our normal society, the one I described before, there was a sort of a spiritual mission creep in which the sacred was extended to the land, to plants, animals, and the weather until the individual was immersed in a holy landscape. Since such things made life possible, it should have been perceived that the creation was ongoing. The fragmentation and amalgamation of tribes, oh, that's just a jaw-breaking way of saying tribes breaking apart and coming together, drove such feelings away until science proclaimed that the natural world is not a holy thing, but a place where we could exploit things for our own advantage because there was no other ultimate value. From there was a short distance to seeing that people are parts of the natural world. So, of course, um, they uh, they are to be exploited ruthlessly, just like the rest of the natural world. I know I'm getting into politics again, but it seems to me that that oppressive politics and oppressive concentration of power and wealth are to be expected as a society putrefies. All right, we're now in the late stages of extinction. We, meaning all humankind, mankind, person kind, per daughter kind, per daughter's kind, whatever you want to say, and mean everybody. We're now in the late stages of extinction, so make sure your stomach is ready. If a population made it this far, nature takes off the gloves. In other words, if they're as outbred as we are, nature um, isn't just giving us a chance to wander down the long walk. Nature takes off the gloves, and exterminating the population becomes of paramount importance because of the danger to the rest of the species. That danger is so great that it's now very, very pressing for nature to eliminate the population already degraded by outbreeding. Now recall, there seems to be an impulse in humans to perceive divine presence. Recall that atheism claims support from science, which should give it enormous prestige, and humans are drawn to status before love. And atheism carries with it a denial of any value for humans beyond anything that might be exploited. Call forth your cosmically impossible abstract reasoning, and you might think that humans are still needing spiritual context. Humans, still needing their spiritual context, have their conventional religions withdrawn. They will now turn to the only other obvious pattern, which would be whatever the religion was worried about. You see, this rather parallels nature reversing all the selection and use patterns of human response. So what was adaptive now is replaced by the maladaptive. Similarly, what was good in the old understanding of religion becomes evil in the new, and vice versa, because nature is out to kill you. The outcome is Satanism, or whatever its equivalent is in another culture. Together, Satanism and reversed emotional impulses produce a drive. In the old days, we would have said perversion, meaning any social activity that is at odds with the normal biological necessity. They never used the word at Harvard Medical School, perversions. Feel free to object to it. Besides, we've been talking about biologically unproductive choices ever since we suggested a steady increase in the number of young men looking outside of the greater family circle for mates. All right, so forget it. We've been up to our ears in that for an hour. Is there serious Satanism going on now? Well, they haven't recruited me, so I don't know. There is an undercurrent of suspicion and a wish that the postulated Satanists that are suspected of this, that they be exposed and destroyed. It might happen if it happens soon. But these are leaders in the march toward outbreeding, and they are highly effective and high status people with enormous resources and a bent toward violence. Once they have exalted themselves enough and the commoners have moved far enough in the same direction, then expose them as you will. You will never overthrow them. That doesn't happen. The high status, violent, the high status people with the monopoly on violence, they're never overthrown. The only thing that can destroy them is a demographic collapse. All their babies stop. But by the time that happens, others will be entrained. That is, they draw them along behind. Once today's Satanists are gone because they just flat died out, there'll be a new crop because outbreeding has reached down into the segment of the population we would call the sturdy yeoman, the productive middle class. Okay, yeah. Stop, change subject. Protecting children has to be an instinct towering above all others. Verse that result is child molesting. I don't have any numbers, but I have a few friends who were victims of child molesting. It did not take great sensitivity to suspect that the result had left permanent damage to their ability to socialize. Heroically, they fought and compensated. Score another round for nature snuffing out the population. What about murdering children? Of course it happens, and of course it can be called human sacrifice. Biologically, there's not much difference between murdering a child and sacrificing a child to some religious entity. Remember the story of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham set out to sacrifice his son. In the story, there was divine intercession, but his intention was clear. The story has been retold for millennia, that's thousands of years, and for thousands of years people have believed it. If the story were totally implausible, don't you think people would have talked about something else? So yeah, human sacrifice has been all too real. Generally speaking, sacrificing an animal was in preparation for eating it. This was definitely true in ancient Rome and ancient Judea. I'm pretty sure it was true in ancient Greece too. So for some centuries, it would have been obvious that sacrificing a child meant cannibalism. Yeah, Mr. Abraham was going not only to kill, but to cook and eat Isaac. They were sacrificing, eating animals on a regular basis. Absolutely. Biologically, except for a trivial interest of nutrition, parenthesis, until very late in the day when the society is disintegrated and everybody's starving and there's no food source but cannibalism, close parenthesis. Except for a trivial issue of nutrition, cannibalism was without impact. Isaac was lucky. With Iphigenia, accounts vary. I think for normal people, the expected course of events was just too horrible to imagine. That's why I'm inviting you to imagine it now, because if I can get your attention and get you working on this, we might prevent it in the future. The opposite side of the coin of young people moving out for the sake of a different sexual horizon is that the power elite, the high status people with their monopoly on violence, may encourage immigration. Now that overwhelms me. For decades, I was a busy practicing medical doctor. I'm now less busy. Any number of people sought my help or referred to me for help. Never once did I ever do anything that was not my best to render that help. I'm no saint. That's what it's like. Someone comes to you to help and you've told them you'd help them. If you can blow off helping them, you've got a serious problem. For the elite to do something as blatantly destructive to the needs of a population as immigration, any immigration, is, well, to me it's subhuman. At least the previous perversions were decisions based on the choice of one or a few people, affecting one or a few people. This is slaughter on an astronomical scale. And even if the overlords are working in profound ignorance of the biological implications, it's theft for people on that scale. People who can ill afford it and who trust these mighty of the earth to look after their needs, meaning the needs of the people. And yet this is the one thing where one knows this is more than a possibility. It's actually going on. This one's real. All right, you don't have to say, well, I don't have decent numbers on that. No, you do have decent numbers. You look it up anywhere, watch it. any rich nation and watch the immigrants pile in at the invitation of the elite. Those elite, well, they need to be put in a cage. I don't know. Seems to me. I mean, we put other horrible man-killing monsters into cages. Yeah, you show me a poisonous reptile slithering down the street, killing people left, right, and center. By the time it's killed 1,000 people, a trifle for immigration. Somebody want to either kill it, and we don't support violence, or put it in a cage where we'll be safe from it. Um, as the babies in the rich world stop, there will quickly come a time when there's simply not enough capable young people to maintain our high-tech civilization. We will be back to traditional means of agriculture, which under ideal conditions can feed 2 billion, but conditions will be anything but ideal. Feeding 500 million people might be more realistic in a world that may have 7 billion. From there come the hunger wars. Given our appalling weapons, which will not vanish at once when the technology that created them vanishes, war over the scraps of remaining food seems inevitable. Will the overlords then stop short of genocide? We already see their colors in the presence of immigration. If all this fails to reduce the genetic variable to that of a village of a few dozen who never mate outside the circle, nature has another trick. And of course, you're not going to have genetic variability dropping that low until people start marrying kin. Can't happen. Instead of depending on populations taking each other out or waiting for the infertile to die, nature may go straight for the kill. Populations may begin to kill off themselves. Call it Sui-genocide. Okay, let me repeat, I don't have decent numbers, but there are some anecdotes, not to be confused with antidotes, which are things that counteract poison. Okay, as a boy, I read a volume of Ripley's Believe It or Not. I do not know what became of that volume, and they didn't give a reference. But, and I can't fact check, but one story was about an Asian prince who habitually had people executed for little or no cause. One day he stuck his thumb with a rose horn and screamed, "I want everybody killed." The province was soon virtually depopulated. Okay, they killed essentially everybody. If you're wondering how anybody could know about the rose, take your point. That makes it a little shaky. When people remember the story of Lot, you remember I told you go back and look at it? They, of course, remember fire coming down from heaven and Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt. Even though she'd been warned not to look back. Okay, we play the same game, the rose thorn game. How could anybody know? I'd like to dismiss the salt thing because nobody else could have looked back. Otherwise, they'd have been turned into salt and they couldn't have told us. Similarly, prior to Lot bolting up his family, a small riot developed outside his house. Men wanted to have sex with Lot's guests. A couple of angels in the story. No doubt the town was far down the outbreeding trail when they realized that their juicy mark here meaning the things they had, the men they had sought to have sex with, they realized they'd escaped, they, the people of the town went crazy. The fire could not have been seen coming down. Scripture covers that by saying Abraham saw the fire coming down into Sodom, the relevant city. From way off in Mesopotamia, that ignores the curvature of the earth. The people of Sodom torched their own town. Sure, you may consider the whole thing a myth, but if so, it was a myth long remembered, long believed, and plausible for that reason. People saw in it something in themselves or in their communities. All right, I recently saw a show on YouTube. Bless you, YouTube. It is for you that I do this. In that show, the narrator predicted that overlords were going to set up a device in the very near future. Today's the 21st of September. Yeah, around this time. It would release an electromagnetic pulse over the U.S. that would shut down every electronic device along with the power grid, resulting in collapse of the society and famine of depopulating magnitude. So that would be a third case of Sui-genocide. Well, at least it happened in his mind. So the notion of a nation immolating itself, murdering itself, not beyond the imagination of some people. And finally, it may be, maybe somebody will set off something and directly extinguishes pan-genocide. Possible devices, and there's no point in it, but I could explain to you possible designs for devices that could extinguish all life on Earth. But it's no use to you. I think it's pretty clear that nobody's ever done that. There's still some of us left. I cannot imagine how natural selection would select for behavior that. So that one I dismiss. Pan-genocide, no, I don't think it's going to happen. Doesn't really matter, of course. Outbreeding infertility is going to take us down long before pan-genocide would happen. As I said, these are not things I can support with statistically valid numbers. I can't offer many good arguments as to what order they might come in this. And there may be, and probably are, ones I've included or excluded in error through some combination of ignorance and stupidity. But some of them might come to pass. Some of them might happen. If so, don't look to any supernatural cause. Natural causes that are around us, and any or all of these things might be produced by outbreeding depression alone.